You know, folks, when you do this kind of content day in and day out, people will send you stories. And a lot of times I'll read the headline and I'll say to myself, that has to be satire. There's no way that that could possibly be real. And then I'll go and I'll do a little bit more digging. And sure enough, I'll find out that it was real because that's the crazy world that we live in these days. It's really hard to tell the difference now between satire and reality. And that is definitely the case with this next story. When I first seen it, I thought, no, there's no way that this is real. This has to be fiction. But folks, it actually turned out to be a fact. A blind man in Indiana went to get a concealed carry permit, and he got it. He did so to protest and to show just how lax our gun laws are. And no, I'm not making this up. Take a look at this clip.
Tonight, we're looking into a story getting some buzz. It claims a blind man was issued a concealed carry gun permit in Indiana. And it's true. Terry Sutherland was using his white cane when he came to the city-county building in Indianapolis to get fingerprinted for the permit. He says he also spoke with several people who knew he was blind. But despite that, he was still issued a concealed carry permit without an issue. Sutherland has no intention of using a gun. He says he went through the process to highlight the need for common sense gun laws. He says he sent letters to state lawmakers and he has not yet heard back.
So I got to be honest, when I watched that clip, the first thing that I did was go into the comment section, which I knew I was going to regret. And right there at the top was someone that said, why shouldn't a blind person be allowed to defend themselves? Now, I want to be very careful with how I approach this subject because I in no way want to make fun or belittle anyone here. But how could it be a good idea for a blind man to have a gun? How could that be a good idea when they wouldn't even be able to see what it is they're shooting at? We have a whole lot of heated conversations about the Second Amendment. If you want to get an argument started in my part of the world, the quickest way to do it, besides talking about coal, is to talk about the Second Amendment. And when you do, you will get people all fired up and they will accuse you of being against the Second Amendment. Before we keep rolling, I want to make it very clear that I'm for the Second Amendment. I believe that everyone should have a right to protect and defend themselves and protect and defend their families. But I'm a person who's for common sense, and I would like to see more common sense gun laws put in place. I would like to see more hoops for people to jump through. I would like to see stricter background checks. I would like to see safe storage laws. And the reason why I'm for all of those things is because this is the part that we don't talk about enough. We are talking about an instrument that in just a few seconds can end multiple lives. And it doesn't even take someone who's that skilled. You could take someone that's not skilled at all. Yes, a blind man could do damage and could take multiple lives with these weapons. That's what we're talking about. And when you are on the receiving end of some madman that has decided to just, pretty much end his own life, he knows how these stories ends. He knows how they always end, and so he's going out there and he's just going for it. When you're on the receiving end of that, I think politics goes out the window. I don't imagine at that point you're caring about who's the Democrat and who's the Republican in the room. Guns are the number one killer of children in this country. That should be enough of a reason for us to put our politics aside and have a reasonable conversation about this. But yet we had people like Tim Burchett here in Tennessee that said you can't fix it. If somebody's going to hurt you, they're just going to. You ain't nothing you can do about it. Well, I disagree with that. I think we can fix it. And I think when it comes to our kids, we should put all of our politics aside, put all the culture wars aside, put our love or hatred for Donald Trump, whichever way you fall on that, put all that aside and say we really need to focus on this one. Because this is a very serious issue. Now, this guy did do this as a sign of protest. And honestly, if I had have been one of the people that saw him coming in, I would have thought he was trolling. I really would have thought that this was someone trolling me, trying to get a permit. I would have never took it serious, but there were people who talked to him and knew he was blind and still gave it to him anyway. And then there's people out there that says, yep, that's a good idea. I don't see anything wrong with that. And there's people out there that will say, man, a lot of people don't see anything wrong with it. We're trying to have a very serious conversation, and I really appreciate this dude doing this protest because what it did was show just how lax our laws is, and what it did was show just how the people in charge of these things, just how much they don't care. And we should care. We should absolutely care. And we should be willing to sit down and have the hard discussions and the tough debates, and we should put our children first. Now, there's a book that I highly recommend on this subject. I actually sent Adam Mockler a copy of this for his bookshelf, but this is The Second Amendment, by a biography by Michael Waldman. And I want to read just to you from the back of it here. It says, at a time of renewed debate over guns in America, what does the Second Amendment mean? This book at the history of the most controversial, volatile, misunderstood provision of the Bill of Rights. The framers wrote the amendment to calm public fear that the new national government would crush state militias made up of all white adult men who were required to own a gun to serve. After the Civil War, the 14th Amendment worked to get guns to freed slaves. As the country spread to the western frontier, violence spread too. In the 20th century, with prohibition and gangsterism, the first federal restrictions were passed. In all four separate times, the Supreme Court ruled against a constitutional right to own a gun. Michael Waldman's narrative demonstrates that our view of the amendment is set by the rough and tumble of political advocacy and public agitation. It's a story of America's enduring debate over individual rights, race, and the role of government. I highly recommend this book because I really believe that our founding fathers did not see what was coming. I mean, how could they? And I really believe that when they framed the Second Amendment, they were not thinking that a blind man in Indiana could walk in and buy a gun. I really don't think that's what they were going for at all. And so these are conversations and these are discussions that we need to be able to have, and we need to be able to put our politics aside. It's so frustrating to me when I see debates about this subject and I just see people screaming in one another's faces, trying to one-up someone so they can put it on Facebook that they own the libs. Let's move past that kind of rhetoric. Let's have a heartfelt conversation about this, and let's move forward with some common sense. That's all we're asking for is common sense. I don't think that's too much to ask. And that does not mean that I'm for people losing their guns. I've never met a Democrat, I'll say it again, I've never met a Democrat who was for guns being confiscated from everybody, who just doing the government doing roundups. I've never met anyone that said that. All we've ever asked for is some common sense. And I don't see why that's a radical idea. I'm so tired of being lumped in and called the radical left because I think that a blind man shouldn't be allowed to buy a firearm or have a concealed permit. And again, I'm in no way trying to make fun or belittle the disabled here. Everyone has a right to protect themselves. But that right there just goes to show you how lax our laws are. So I'm glad the guy did that because it just continues to raise awareness on this very serious issue that we should all put our politics aside on and come together and have some common sense. I truly appreciate your support here on the channel. And if you haven't already, be sure and hit that subscribe button. It just helps it really helps us out. Hit the like button and get in on this conversation if you want to. But I tell you what, sometimes you have to steer clear of those comment sections because you will see some of the absolute most insane comments. I get them every day, and I get plenty of messages every day. And when you do this kind of content, like I said at the start of the video, you're always trying to figure out what's satire and what's not. You're always trying to figure out who's really trying to hide behind fake names and who's not. And you're always plugged in. You're like on call constantly. Even if you try to take a day off, in the middle of that, some craziness can happen and you need to talk about it. So I'll continue to do my best, and I appreciate your all support here on the channel very much. And we'll just continue to push forward, and we'll continue to push forward for common sense.